All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahawashi, Bahashim, Lukakudash. I want to give the honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well in grace and peace, to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. This is your fellow servant, Rokoyer from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you with another impromptu lesson. Just striking while the iron's hot. I just got done watching the Elder Yashawamba's recent video going into the straight gate. And, just had me meditating on how the straight gate is really a proving ground for the Lord's elect. And as we all partake in that proving ground, the trials, the tribulations, the obstacles, the sufferings, all right, all of these things are working to bring us in alignment with the spirit of Yahawashi. All right, because the whole purpose of the ministry being established and the word being sent out is for us here in these latter days to be able to embody Yahawashi, embody the word. The word was sent out essentially as the curriculum, and the ministry was established as a place to test that curriculum, apply that curriculum so that we might be able to embody it, and the embodiment of Yahawashi comes through suffering. So I just want to grab a couple of precepts, Lord wants us edifying unto you elect. All right, because the more that we suffer, the more trials that we go through, the more tribulations that we experience, all right, the closer we draw to the spirit of Yahawashi. All right, the closer we get to the mind state that Yahawashi had when he walked the earth, the closer we get to the humility that Yahawashi exuded. All right, the meekness, the charity, the long suffering, the patience, the endurance. All right, the closer we draw to these attributes, the more we suffer. So the closer we draw to these attributes of Yahawashi, and the more and more we begin to embody the word, which is what the ministry was established for us to do. The word was sent so that we would embody the word, embody Yahawashi. That's what the scriptures foretell the elect doing, therefore getting the victory over, death, over this present evil world. But I want to grab this here in Ephesians chapter 4. And matter of fact, let's get that a second. I want to get this actually in 1 Peter chapter 4. In verse 1, it says, "For as much then as Hamashiach have suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that hath suffered in the flesh have ceased from sin." All right, and we are to arm ourselves with the like mind of Yahawashi. All right, who suffered for us in the flesh. All right, Yahawashi went through sufferings far greater than anything that we'll ever experience on this side of life. All right, being chained down in these vessels of darkness, being chained down in the flesh, having bodily ailments, mental afflictions, financial problems, the list goes on. Although we suffer these things, it's far less than what our Lord suffered for our whole nation. We're going through a proving process, individually, for ourselves, to be found worthy, of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahawashi. But Yahawashi went through a proving process for the whole nation. So his suffering was far greater than anything that we'll ever experience in this world, So with that being said, we're to follow after his footsteps, to receive, because we see that, after the sufferings of Yahawashi, he entered into glory. And the scriptures speak about how the servant is not greater than his Lord. So for us to also enter the glory of Yahweh Bahashim Yahawashi, we must also go through sufferings. We must also go through that straight gate. All right, it's necessary. Like the Elder Yashawamba said, the straight gate is going to get straighter. There's more trials ahead. There's more tribulations. There's more sufferings ahead. 2025 was a rough year for brothers. In 2026, it has more sufferings ahead. But one thing to keep in mind is that these sufferings are what is drawing us closer and aligning us closer to the spirit of Yahawashi. All right, because as the scriptures say, let me get it. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 16. It says, "For which cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day." All right, so though we do go through these sufferings and our outward man perishes, because the American experience is traumatic, man. The elder Bishop Atazawan was speaking on this recent camp, about the traumatic experience, that we've all partaken of growing up here in America, Babylon the Great. It's traumatic mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. All right, it's a very traumatic experience. We perish outwardly every day. This world truly is wearing out the saints. We work nonstop. We're constantly moving. We have very little time for rest, very little time, for self-embetterment. We're constantly chipping away at this wheel, this rat, this hamster wheel. Our outward man is perishing every single day. But although our outward man is perishing, the inward man is being renewed day by day. The inward man is becoming stronger and more resilient. And that's why certain trials, seem to brush off, brothers' backs, the more and more we endure this truth. The more and more we overcome sufferings, we overcome trials, the less grave it seems to us, as they pop up in the future. And it's not because the trials are getting easier. It's because brothers are becoming more and more resilient. The spirit within us is strengthening. The spirit within us is growing. All through the spirit and power of Yahawashi. I actually want to get that word in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 for renewed. Just to see what that says. And bear with me, it's raining outside. I'm at the plantation, so the phone is running a little slow. But this is the word renewed, Strong's G341, like a nail. It says to renovate, to renew. It says to cause to grow up, new, to make new. New strength and vigor is given to one. That's right, man. It says new strength and vigor is given to one to be changed into a new kind of life as opposed to the former corrupt state. All right, and that's what's happening inwardly. Inwardly, we're being changed into a new kind. All right, that unmovable, that unwavering. All right, that faithful to Yahawashi, opposed to the former corrupt state. All right, right now is a purging process. The Lord is purging his fine gold. We're all going through that proving process. And the elect, Lord willing, we're that number, all right, are shutting off that former corrupt state, all right, and entering into that new man, all right, that Yahawashi is cultivating. We're entering into that new man, and these things are coming through the sufferings. Our alignment with the spirit of Yahawashi is coming through suffering. And that links right up with 2 Corinthians 14. 2 Esdras 14. Shutting off that corrupt state. This is 2 Esdras 14 and verse 14. It says, "Let go from thee mortal thoughts, cast away the burdens of man, put off now the weak nature, and set aside the thoughts that are most heavy unto thee, and haste thee to flee from these times." All right, and right now we're being caused to put off the weak nature. All right, that fleshly desire, that fleshly, these fleshly chains. And we're being taught to embody our spiritual nature. We're being taught to embody Yahawashi. All right? Because Yahawashi had range. Brothers were speaking about this a couple of weeks ago, with the elder Ayash from Mississippi. Yahawashi had range. He knew how to abound He knew how to abase. He knew how to exhort, how to correct. He was long-suffering. He was patient. He was humble. He was austere. he just had, Yahawashi had range. He could enter into any room. He could enter into any room with grace. And we're learning how to do that ourselves. How to embody the range of Yahawashi. But I wanted to get this again in 1 Peter chapter 4. In verse 1. It says, for as much then, hold on. Let me get it in the blue line. Let's see what it says. This is 1 Peter 4 in verse 1 in the NLT. It says, so then, since Hamashiach suffered physical pain, you must arm yourselves with the same attitude he had and be ready to suffer. And be ready to suffer too. For if you have suffered physically for Hamashiach, you have finished with sin. All right? And we have to arm ourselves likewise with the same mind, being ready to suffer. All right? So that we all may enter into the glory of Yahawashi's kingdom. Yahawashi suffered for the nation. Now we must carry our cross, our burden, in order to inherit the kingdom of Yahawashi. So we have to be ready to suffer. We have to be ready to go through trials, to continue to be proved. And understand that this proving process is drawing us closer in alignment with the spirit of Yahawashi. All right? All of these things are necessary. And the scriptures also speak about in the book of Acts, the 14th chapter, how through much tribulation, we're going to enter into the kingdom. All right? The kingdom will come, was foretold or prophesied to come through tribulation. So this tribulation, this trial period that we're going through is necessary in order to enter into the kingdom, which we so desperately yearn for. We're desperately yearning for the kingdom, man. Brothers are tired, tired of being here in this place, tired of suffering, this evil existence. And the only way through this is to suffer. The only way through this is to continue to go through the straight gate and to continue to remain faithful in Yahawashi, Yahweh Bahasham Yahawashi. All right, continue to draw closer in alignment with the spirit of Yahawashi, which comes through suffering. But I just want to come with this, brief message. Just something I was meditating on. Just wanted to strike while the iron was hot. We're drawn closer to Yahawashi through suffering. So continue to endure. All right, continue to endure. The Lord is moving fast on our behalves. All right, Lord willing, we're the elect. The Lord is moving fast on our behalf. All right, and things are going to continue to escalate. Continue to get prophecy is going to continue to escalate. It's going to continue to come forth. All right, and in the process, our trials and tribulations are going to continue to escalate. Going to continue to come forth. All right, because the Lord has to prove his true brethren, his true friends. All right, those who are going to be with him, whether he abases or whether he's abounding. And as the Spirit of the Lord has abounded in us, all right, we have to be ready and willing to go through that abasement as well. But with that being said, Lord, this is edifying unto you elect. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahawashi, Bahashim Rakakodash, and double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well. Grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing the truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. Shalom. Stay up.